الرجيم. بفضل الله، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طاسيم ميم. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. نتلو عليك من نبأ موسى وفرعون بالحق لقوم يؤمنون. إن فرعون علا في الأرض وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم يذبح أبناءهم ويستحيي نساءهم إنه كان من المفسدين. ونريد أن نمن على الذين استضعفوا في الأرض ونجعلهم أئمة ونجعلهم الوارثين ونمكن لهم في الأرض ونري فرعون وهامان وجنودهما منهم ما كانوا يحذرون. وأوحينا إلى أم موسى أن أرضعيه فإذا خفت عليه فألقيه في اليم ولا تخافي ولا تحزني إنا رادوه إليك وجاعلوه من المرسلين. فالتقطه آل فرعون ليكون لهم عدوا وحزنا إن فرعون وهامان وجنودهما كانوا خاطئين. وقالت امرأة فرعون قرة عين لي ولك لا تقتلوه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وهم لا يشعرون. وأصبح فؤاد أم موسى فارغا إن كادت لتبدي به لولا أن ربطنا على قلبها لتكون من المؤمنين. وقالت لأخته قصيه فبصرت به عن جنب وهم لا يشعرون. وحرمنا عليه المراضع من قبل فقالت هل أدلكم على أهل بيت يكفلونه لكم وهم له ناصحون. فرددناه إلى أمه كي تقر عينها ولا تحزن ولتعلم أن وعد الله حق ولكن أكثرهم لا يعلمون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلى الله على محمد وآله. تفضل استريح. عفوا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin, just an important announcement. Inshallah, from next week, we'll begin at 7 o'clock because of the summer timing, and because Salah is going to get later and later, inshallah. So next week, it'll be beginning at 7 p.m. And for the people who attend LEAP, I think they'll announce it there, but I think LEAP is taking a break for December, January, I believe. So there won't be any LEAP for December, January. But from next week, it'll be, inshallah, 7 p.m. start. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد كرمنا بني آدم وحملناهم في البر والبحر ورزقناهم من الطيبات وفضلناهم على كثير ممن خلقنا تفضيلا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. And verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored the children of Adam, and He has carried them on the earth and on the ocean, and He has given them bounties, the good bounties, and surely He has given them distinction over much of His creation, a thorough distinction. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about in this verse in the Holy Quran that the children of Adam, human beings, mankind, is honored. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them these distinctions of being able to traverse over ocean and over land, and given them so many different types of bounties, and that Allah has given them distinction, a clear distinction over much of His creation. On this evening we commemorate the birth of Sayyidah Zainab salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha. And Sayyidah Zainab is the daughter of Imam Ali and Fatima al-Zahra, salamullah alayhim. And she was born in 626 or 631 AD on the 5th of Jamad al-Awwal. And she was martyred on, or she left this world 681 AD on the 15th of Rajab. To understand Sayyidah Zainab salawatullahi alayha, we need to understand the spectrum of values in this world and what value everything carries and the relation of that value. So when we look, for example, at a business or a vehicle or a home or clothing or whatever it is, the value that it holds depends on the effort that it took to make this thing. How many people did it take to create this thing? Who are the people that created it, for example? Or sometimes we look at the value is based on whoever wants to pay that price, like that painting of Mona Lisa, but the male version, not the female version. Hundreds of millions of dollars it was sold for. And many of these things, surely, no matter how long it took for them to paint it, it wasn't worth $300 or $400 million. But somebody was willing to pay that price for whatever reason, and so it sort of stood and it held that value. So when we have a look and see, or we want to quantify what is the quality of a person, like say the Zainab salawatullahi alayha, and the stand that she took, and exactly what were the values that she stood for. For isn't that essentially what our identity is? What we hold dear and what we don't hold dear? When you ask somebody, what is it that you stand for? What do you stand for? You think about it for yourself, that what is it that I do stand for? What are my values? What are the things that are about me, or my beliefs, or what I hold dear that is non-negotiable? When we see the religion of Islam, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he identifies this religion by saying, La sharaf a'la min al-Islam, that there is no honor that is higher or greater than Islam. So this submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, belief in His prophets, belief in His imams, belief in the day of death, belief in the day of judgment, belief that everyone will be held accountable on a certain day, this system known as Islam, the Imam says there is no honor higher than this system. And how valuable is this system? The value of this system is shown through the efforts that have been put from mankind and from the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to maintaining this system. When Allah created Nabi Adam alayhi salam and onwards, we hear the stories of the prophets and the sacrifices that they made for this religion. That whatever they paid, they said was a lower price than what this religion is worth. The sons of Nabi Adam, Habil and Qabil. Qabil killed Habil. Why? He wanted to be Khalifatullah al-ard. He wanted to be the Khalif, the vicegerent of Allah on this earth. And so he killed his brother. He smashed his head in with a rock. And Habil said, if you come and attack me, I will not touch you. So Habil paid this price because the religion of Islam was greater than this. And again, let me clarify. When we say the religion of Islam, the Orientalists sometimes say, they call it Mohammedanism. That we are Mohammedans. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. That we are followers of this holy prophet. But really Islam is the grand message from the time of Nabi Adam salawatullahi alayhi and all the way through to the final prophet. And then we hear about all of these other prophets and the things that they went through. Prophets like the prophet Jirjis. They say the prophet Jirjis, the way he was killed, that they combed his body with metal combs. It was a torture method. They'd get metal combs and comb the skin off you. So you skin someone alive, this way you get metal combs and you comb the skin off the person. And he accepted this as a price for Islam. He was a prophet that was located in the Yemen. We hear about prophets like Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam. And Nabi Zakaria, who looked after Sayyidah Maryam, when he was running away from the Banu Israel and they wanted to kill him, as is their thing. And we see it today, the descendants of the Banu Israel are people who are killers. They kill innocents. This is the thing that they do. They kill prophets. This is the thing that they do. We see today the descendants or the people who claim to be connected to them or have that belief in them, wholesale they'll kill a journalist or they'll kill innocent people. This happens all the time. However, the Banu Israel, they chased Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam until he reached a place where he found a tree. And because he is a prophet, the prophet has these abilities. He touched the tree and the tree opened up. Nabi Zakaria entered the tree and the tree closed behind him. Now, as it closed behind him, the narration says Iblis grabbed a part of his cloak and held it out of the tree. When the tree closed, that part of the cloak was hanging out of the tree. So when they came and they saw part of the cloak there, they said that he must be inside there. The prophet is in the tree. What shall we do? They got a saw. And this saw, they began to saw the tree in half. And while sawing the tree in half, they sawed Nabi Zakaria alayhi salam in half. And as he was being sawn in half, an angel, Jibreel, came down and said, if you are silent during this, you will be counted as of the patient ones, min as-sabirin. And he was sawed completely in half in silence, according to this narration. Nabi Yahya alayhi salam, who was decapitated, and his head was gifted to a licentious woman. All of these prophets and the trials that they went through was for what? For the delivery of the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that delivery to reach us today. This is something that's important, wa alaykum salam, something that is important for us to understand, that this is the value of this Islam that we either take seriously or we take lightly. This is the value of the prayers that reached us and the laws of Islam that reached us. These laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which eventually were delivered to us by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. When they reached the Holy Prophet himself, he says, مَا أُوذِيَ نَبِي مِثْلَ مَا أُوذِيتُ, that no prophet was harmed the way I was harmed. Why? We heard the story of all of these prophets, but our prophet wasn't killed in this manner. But we realize and understand that there are things that are worse than physical torture. There are things that are worse than physical pain. Of the things that are worse than physical pain are your loved ones being harmed or hurt, and you have nothing or you can't do anything about it. For Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he knew, other than the physical pain that he went through from the enemies, they would throw brambles and thorns in his path when he would walk. They would throw impurities upon him. They would attack him. They would throw rocks on him. Put that aside. They betrayed him multiple times in battle, but put that aside. The fact that he knew that his offspring, and they were his offspring, other than the verses we used last week in the Holy Quran, أنفسنا وأنفسهم أبناءنا وأبناءكم عفوا أنفسنا وأنفسكم. These verses in the Quran saying that Imam Ali was the self of the Prophet, or in the Mubahala, Rasulullah brought his own children there, meaning Al-Hasan wal-Hussein, who Allah attributes to Rasulullah. There is a tradition where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he tells the people that every prophet has his lineage from himself except for me. My lineage is from Ali sallallahu alayhi. So, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the lineage of the Holy Prophet comes from Imam Ali alayhi salam. Of this lineage is a Sayyidah Zainab bint al-Imam Ali alayhi salam, alayhi salam. Sayyidah Zainab, when the Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha was pregnant with her, like being pregnant with Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein, it was a difficult pregnancy. The reason it was a difficult pregnancy is because she knew what she was carrying. And this is a very important point that we need to take on board when we learn about Sayyidah Zainab salawatullahi alayha. We see that the reason it was a difficult pregnancy is because she knew that this baby that was within her womb was going to live a very difficult life. When we look at any woman that is pregnant and she's on the verge of motherhood, or any parent, whenever you look at your children, all you think about is how this child will grow old, and this child will have a family, and one day they too will be a father or a mother, and one day they'll be a grandfather or a grandmother, and they have all of these things, good things that are awaiting them. All you have is these great expectations for their future. Whereas Fatima alayhi salam, she knew that these children are going to live very difficult lives. In honor of Islam, in upholding the message of Islam, but she understood why Jibreel had came and told the Prophet salawatullahi alayhi, that these people are going to be harmed in the worst way possible. And this is why when Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha was born, some narrations say Rasulullah was not in the Medina, and he entered the Medina a few days later. And they had been waiting for Rasulullah to give her her name. And so when she was born, the Holy Prophet came and he said, bring me my daughter. So they bring him the daughter, or bring me your daughter. He holds Sayyidah Zainab, he hugs her to his chest, he places his cheek on her cheek, and he begins to cry. They say, Ya Rasulullah, why is it you're crying? He says that she will see trials and calamities when she gets older that nobody has even heard of. Trials and calamities that are so difficult, and I cry for these trials that this girl will eventually end up persevering through and seeing and experiencing and living. And so when we hear this about Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha, we begin to understand that this religion has such a high value in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that everything that these prophets and these imams give for it is to try and tell us and give us an example of how valuable it is. That there is no life that is too much for it, nor is there any pain that is worth more for it, nor is there any price that is to the value of this system of life, which is the religion of Islam. That's the first point. The second point is that we need to look at where we are in relation to the religion of Islam. So we see how difficult it was for this religion to finally reach us. That these are just not words that we hear from the preacher, or we hear from our parents about praying and about fasting and about abstaining from sin and about doing good unto others. But these are words that have been passed down through thousands of years of blood, sweat, and tears. So when we have this thought, we have to look at our own lives and say, what is my goal in this life, and what is it that marks success in this life? What are my goals, and what is it that marks success? Many a person, you ask them, what is your goal in life? What is it that you want to achieve? And they might have some sort of goal in mind. I want to travel to this destination, or I want to purchase this thing or that thing, or I want to be rich and make a lot of money. And this for me is my goal, and this for me is my marker of success. So when you look at it in this manner, or you ask, for example, a youth, what do you want to do when you finish school? And they say, oh, I don't know what I want to do. I'll wait and see what my marks are, and based on that, depending on which university accepts me, this is what I'll do. Or I'll try and get a job with my cousin, or whatever it is. That this is what they see as their goal, or this for themselves, for example, is a marker of success. What we need to do is we need to have an honest conversation with ourselves about what it is that marks success. Or why is it that I want to achieve what it is that I want to achieve. And ultimately, when you have this conversation, it brings you down to one key point. So for example, if it is wealth that you want, what's the reason behind this wealth? Because I want to be needless, I want to be able to pay off my bills easily, and I want to feed my children. And you say, okay, so what you actually want is sustenance. You want subsistence. You want to be able to continue living your life. This is what it is. So it's life that you actually love, to be existent. It's not the money per se. The money is a means to get you to this life. Or you might say, for example, that what I actually want is a certain motor vehicle. And why do you want this motor vehicle? Because when I drive it, it's fast and it's a fun car. All right, so what you're looking for is fun. Yeah, not just fun. When people see me in this vehicle, they will see me and they will say, look how cool this person is. Look at the vehicle that he drives. This means he's a cool person. True? And then you say, all right, so it's not exactly that. What it is I want to be loved. I want people to look at me and say, I love this person. And I want people to say that this person belongs. He belongs. What's the difference, for example, between a person wearing a brand of clothes? You know, if you're wearing, for example, 3 stripes, it's a certain brand. 4 stripes, you couldn't afford the other brand. And this is the way that it works. But really, ultimately, they're probably made in the same factory exactly, or at least the factory next to it. It's stitched by the same thing, but the point is that we think by wearing that sort of fashion, or carrying that sort of handbag, or wearing those sorts of shoes, we will be amongst these people and we will feel some form of belonging. And ultimately, that belonging means that we are loved. This is why we do this. Isn't this why we tell someone, oh, look at this. I had this house, I sold it, and then I bought this house. Like, mabruk. But the point is, I want to be loved and I want to belong. I could have bought this clothing, instead of that I bought this. Why? Because I want to be loved and I want to belong. God, everything that's material leads down to that. If you have an honest conversation with yourself, you will see that ultimately, this is the thing that we all strive for in this life. From the moment that we are born, from the moment that we enter this earth, this is what we strive to do. We strive to belong, we strive to be loved, and better than being loved is to love. This is why we have children. This is why we want a partner in life, and so on and so forth. What does all of this mean? It means that ultimately, if I want to achieve this true love, it can only come from belonging to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from turning to Allah. Anywhere else, you can't achieve it. I'll tell you why. Allah huwa shakur. Allah is the only one that is grateful. Allah tells us to thank Him for what we have and be grateful for what we have. But really, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does is whatever action we do, He thanks us for it. No one else thanks you. Your children, you work so hard. You work so hard to raise them, to do what's best for them. And no matter how much they try, they can't give you that gratitude back, ever. There's no way. They can't even comprehend what you go through for your children. And the best thing they can do for you is what? Is carry your funeral beer to the grave. That's it. Your nash. That's all. They can carry this and put you into your grave, and that's it. And these are the people that you work so hard for and you live your whole life for. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you do the smallest good deed, even if your intentions aren't fully into it, your intentions aren't fully good, Allah will be grateful for that deed. He'll make sure that that deed comes out and people see it and they know it. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves an individual, then it doesn't matter what everyone else thinks of him. It doesn't matter what the world thinks. Look at our prophets. Look at our imams. When they tasted that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything else went away. It was useless. No one else is grateful. Just think about it for a second. Whenever you see somebody posting on social media, wherever they are or whatever they're doing or whatever wealth they have, do you think people actually sit there and watch it and say, you know what, I'm so happy for this person. He deserves more. The majority of people, they're jealous. Majority of people say, oh, this guy, you know, we do the same thing, but he does it illegally. Or I do it better. Or my skill level is different. Or ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed that this person has X amount of wealth and someone else has Y amount of wealth. But ultimately, it doesn't create people or it doesn't make people to love you. In fact, you see the wealthiest in the world strive to make themselves look normal. You know, I'm sure you've all seen that video of Bill Gates standing in line to buy a hamburger. Billionaire Bill Gates. Do you think he actually stands in line to buy a hamburger? There's a place that makes these nice burgers. Chobani's or something. What's it called? Chebo's Burgers? Someone told me, go get some Chebo's Burgers. I drove past. The line was huge. And I said, get out of here. I'm not going to stand there in line and wait, you know. Probably at my personal fortune's $5.50. But I wouldn't stand in line to do this. Bill Gates comes by to show you that, look, I'm such a normal person. I'll stand in line for a burger. Elon Musk goes so far to tell you, I don't live in a house. It's a rented house. I don't have anything. And all the rest of them, all they sit there and talk about, I donated 16 billion to charity this year. And they start inventing diseases that they cured this year and last year. Why? Because they want to look like, because they know when they show their real wealth, everyone's going to hate on them. No one's going to turn around and say, oh, you know, bless this guy. He's, you know, he has a golden toilet seat. Bless him. You know, this is his 7th private jet. Bless him. They're not going to say that. They're not going to be happy about it. Ultimately, the only one that's grateful for any actions that you do is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu ash-shakur. For when these people understand this, as what the Anbiya have taught us, you realize that the path to success and the goal in life is to have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with you and pleased with your action. You have this and you have everything in the world. And no matter what it costs, it's worth it. This is the demonstration of all of the prophets and all of the imams, particularly Sayyidah Zainab salawatullahi alayha. Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha, she gave us this example by giving everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but she stayed firm and strong and patient and delivered the message of Islam, which we'll go back to inshallah. So of the most important things that we carry and the value, now that we have like a baseline and understand inshallah what the value, or have an idea of the value of this religion, one of the most important thing is the identity that we have. The identity of being a Muslim. Because your identity is all about what you stand for. For example, in the modern world, have a look at something as simple as World Cup football or soccer, all right? Football. There you go. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Something I know nothing about, but World Cup, football, and the teams that are representing their nations. That if a team loses somewhere as civilized as Belgium, they set their whole city on fire, their country on fire because they lost. They rioted. They wanted to bash anybody that looked Moroccan. It went crazy. And we see that people are so in love with their country, they'll actually get offended if somebody disrespects that country in any way. This is part of the ideology of nationalism, but it's also about identity. Like, could you imagine if somebody was to get a football team's jersey, like a Manchester jersey or a Liverpool jersey, and just rip it up and burn it and throw it? There'll be such an argument. You know, some people will get happy, but others will be very upset. What's going on? Why would you do such a thing? Why would you desecrate such a sacred thing, such as a jersey? And this represents nothing. Really, it just represents a team, a football team. But to the people who love football, it represents something much bigger. In the same way that when a person denounces their identity, like their nationality, for example, by ripping up their passport or burning their passport to protest or to argue that my nationality means nothing. Who does that? Nobody does that. Even the people that hate their country to death, it's very rare. Someone will get their passport and rip it up, other than the fact that it's expensive to get another one. But this is one of the systems that the enemies of Islam use against Islam, and it's a method that is very soft, yet we fall over to it and we accept it. Of the examples are like our language. So as Muslims, the Quran was revealed in the Arabic language, and Islam holds some importance to the Arabic language. And yet we see that in the modern world, the most important language, or that's touted as the most important language, is English. Even though it's not the most spoken language in the world. It's universal, but it's not the most spoken. And this language is held so highly that if anybody around the world from any country wants to study science, for example, then you must study it in the English language. To the degree that in the modern world, if you want to prove that you are an academic or you're somebody that's learned, then you must speak a few words of the English language. And we see this phenomenon in the Arab countries. We see it in other countries, that someone who wants to show he's academic, he'll speak Arabic and then he'll throw a few English words in it to show that, look, I'm somebody that's been educated in a European land. Or I've been educated in some sort of English land, some Commonwealth country or something. Because this is where the best institutions of education are. Whereas if you look back at 600-700 years ago, the people in Europe, when they would speak their mother tongue, would throw some words of Arabic in to show that I've been to the Arab lands to be educated. That I've learnt the sciences from the masters of science, from the origins of these sciences. This is what it was like. Things have changed. What this is about, it's about cultural imperialism. Cultural imperialism basically means my culture is better than yours, rather than have respect and say your culture is this, my culture is this. No, my culture is better, so I throw your culture lower than mine and tell you this is the only culture that's counted. And your culture, there's no room for understanding for that culture. We see that this is something that's normal from colonial times to this day. It's still like that. Countries get colonized in a soft manner. So of this, for example, is we see that English literature and English film is held at a higher level than any other language. Although, when we see that the majority of Hollywood movies are the same movie played over and over again, realistically. So I'll give you just a quick small example. Small example is Star Wars and Harry Potter. That's a small example. It's called the Todorov principle, if you want to look it up. So Todorov, he was basically a Ukrainian. Is that right, Sheikh? Russian. And Todorov, he basically wrote a formula of how to tell a good story. Hollywood grabbed this and they loved it. And they said, you know what, we're going to go through with it. Have a look. It's the same story over and over again. Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker. It's basically the same sort of thing. Luke Skywalker's living with his uncle and auntie. Harry Potter's living with his uncle and auntie. All right. Turns out his parents were dead, but they were special. The other guy's parents were dead, but they were special. Same thing, exactly. And he doesn't really know the art, and then they slowly take him, they teach him the art, and then he forms a rebellion. There's a big evil guy that we're scared to mention his name, Voldemort, Darth Vader, whatever. The whole thing, it's the same thing. Look at it, compare it. There are many other movies like that. For example, every Marvel movie that's come out in the last 10 years, it's the same movie repeated over and over again, but it's someone else wearing the suit. That's it. Or a different superhero. But it's the same thing. The unlikely hero finds a friend, the friend helps him, he defeats, he does his thing, and then he returns master of two worlds. This is like the whole thing. But I'm trying to give it to you in short summary, but have a look at it. What I'm trying to say is there's no depth within that. However, it is a type of literature. It is a type of film. Nah? Bulgarian, Ahsant, Bulgarian Todorov. But it's interesting, if you look up Todorov's method and you see this is what they use. Bulgarian. So Todorov, this is the idea that he took, and they tell you, all right, this is the superior type of film. All right? And everyone else's is not. This is the superior type of literature. Even though the lessons that are within that culture or that literature are different. Anyway, the whole point is, through this, they begin to try and destroy the identity of ourselves. This is important. Inshallah, I know we're halfway through and it might be getting a little bit boring, but I beg of your interest, just because this is such an important topic, the topic of our identity, the identity of our children. For us living in the West, it's huge. Not only the West, because of globalization, even within the Middle East, the culture doesn't exist anymore. They have that sort of culture. Wherever you go, it's that same culture, because this culture isn't Western culture, nor is it Eastern culture, but it's capitalistic money culture. That's what it is. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So also beg of the sisters that are listening, please, if you're having a really good conversation, just save it. Inshallah, I'll finish early and you can finish that conversation. To all the sisters that are having a nice chat. It's funny, I can't see up there, but I can tell, I can feel it in my bones. And so when we come back and we talk about the identity of language, this is what they do. Like, just a small example, there was a movie that was released recently on Netflix, and I strongly recommend for anyone to watch this movie. The movie is called Farha, all right? The movie is called Farha. It's about a Palestinian girl in 1948, and it shows how the Israelis kicked the Palestinians out of the villages and just killed them. Now, the reason I recommend this movie is because of the fact that this movie was strongly fought against by the Israeli lobby, because it shows how colonialism works. But this is, put it as a side note, but if you see, they use very powerful imagery, and the imagery that they use wherever the story came from is very similar to the imagery of the saga of Karbala. But if you have a look at this, very similar imagery that they use for this storytelling, but it's a very powerful movie. But the importance of it is, it shows an alternative narrative to the narrative that we're being sold. But that's another story. But if you're going to watch something, that's a good idea to watch that. Next topic, food. This is the same thing. Our food gets put down. Ask the people from my generation and above. We used to throw our food in the bin or hide our food when we were in school. Why? Because Lebanese bread looks weird, for example, right? If you have food that's from a different culture, you're going to get teased. You know, what are you eating? What the heck is this? What the heck is that? So they try and sell us the idea that the food that they want to sell you is of a higher caliber, Do you think, for example, you know how in general, and I don't want to be stereotypical, but it's a general thing when we see that people from the islands, like Samoa and the Cook Islands and places like that, they're large people. They're large. A lot of them are overweight. And a lot of people say, oh my God, this is from the yams that they eat, or this is from what it is. But if you do a little bit of research, you will see that there were certain products that were marketed to those countries, and they became a normal food for them. When before they used to eat natural food off the land, the natural food that they used to have, and they were, mashallah, as you see, physically strong, and they were healthy. Whereas today, these islands, they hold the highest proportion of diabetes. KFC is an example. There's other examples of the leftovers of the turkeys that they used to kill in the United States. Those parts that are left over that were full of fat, they started marketing it to them to make a certain food, and then this became part of their culture. And if there's a good food that's within your culture, they just take it and say it is now ours, like Israeli hummus and Israeli tabbouleh and Israeli couscous. These are actual products. And the thing is, they have nothing to do with that culture, but they take it from somewhere else. They bring it and say, this is from our culture. In the world that we live in today, we look, for example, at many of our children, and they refuse to eat good, home-cooked meals. Instead, they say, no, I don't eat this. Why? Because it seems inferior to what I'm being sold. Well, what do you want to eat, Habibi? Meat pie. All right, meat pie, by law, must have 500 grams per kilogram of flesh that contains no fat. So what's in the other 500 grams? This is my question. So 50% has to be meat. What's left? What is in the other 50%? Sausages. 25% of them by Australian law have to be meat. But what's in the other 75%? Allahu A'lam. They do, you're right. But one of the main reasons they taste so nice, and again, I don't want to make this into a food discussion, but it's ahsan, they do. They taste great. Because what do they put in it that makes it taste great? It's refined sugar. When you put the sauce on top of everything tastes good. Look at your kids, you put them some sauce, they'll keep dipping the same chip just to eat the sauce off the chip, and the chip never gets eaten. Why? Because it's sweet and it tastes fantastic. I get it. What I'm saying, it's incomparable to the nutritional benefits of olive oil, of za'atar, of tomatoes, of burghul, of wheat, of these good and natural foods that are the foods that we eat, of rice, of meat that you can tell what it is when it's cooked, for example. But they make you feel that this is inferior to what it is that you're eating. Even, for example, when you get foods that are, oh, this is low in fat. I'm going to have some of the example I was using today. We have yogurt with, what's that muesli stuff they put on top of the yogurt? They call it, what is it? Not oats, the other one. Granola, ahsant. Granola sounds so healthy, it's awesome. If you look at it nutritionally, you might as well put a handful of Cocoa Pops on top of your yogurt, and it's just as nutritional as granola. Realistically, but this is another topic. My point isn't that. My point is that they make us believe the opposite of what is real. All of a sudden, this highly processed is much better for you than what you culturally accept, that they show a certain culture, and the problem is this takes away from Islamic identity. And Islamic identity is about what? Look at the foods we are taught in Islam. There are certain foods. Like dates, for example. Oh, I don't want to eat a date. It looks funny. Well, at least you know what it is. It just came off a tree and that's it. It's been sun-dried and that's all it is. And it's sweet and it's fine. But many of our children, they're scared of dates. I don't like it. It looks like a cockroach. I don't want to eat it. Yeah. But something that's important, that's part of this is part of stealing away that identity. And we say that hadith, when the Prophet talks the importance of dates, a person that eats dates becomes, for example, courageous. It gives you strength. It gives you courage. For example, foods like whatever, watermelon, lamb, yogurt, rice, these are things, camel, so on and so forth. But put that aside, that's just one note for you to think about, that what's happening to the identity of the generation that's coming. And finally, we look at customs. And the customs that we have when it comes to the concept of marriage. The customs that we have Islamically when it comes to marriage, again, they look and say, oh, no, the way you do it is wrong. What's wrong about it? It's wrong. You can't marry your cousin, for example. All right? Ew, marrying the cousin is so ew, for example. Put that aside for another discussion. Alhamdulillah, it's still legal for now. But just put that aside for another, for example. Why is that so ew? All right? When you market much worse than that. Within film, literature, and television, what's marketed is much worse than that. Much worse than that. Without giving any examples, because it'll take away from the status of this mambar and the believing gathering that's here. 1. 2, meeting of the opposite gender. So they tell us, oh, you have this issue, arranged marriage. What's an arranged marriage? What, that I tell my mother, find me a bride, for example. Find me a good family because I want to get married. And they tell us this is so wrong, yet they're so infatuated with having these TV shows where two people that don't know each other meet and get married. Like Bachelor, Bachelorette, Farmer Needs a Wife, I don't know, all of those. Isn't that all they do? So they tell us that what is this culture that you have, that marriages are arranged and then all of a sudden say we can make money out of it, okay, let's do it. This is that capitalistic culture. Let's monetize it and make it look like whatever culture you have is in the dirt. This is Islamic culture. This is the way that it's meant to work. Why? When we look at what are the attributes that I look for when it comes to marriage, these attributes that I look for, Islam tells you what the important things are. The religion, deen, akhlaq and khuluq, which is your disposition and your manners. This is what's important when it comes to marriage. Does the person fear Allah, that he won't go out of the way, he won't destroy the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he gets angry or upset? That he say, oh, I don't care what the religion says, this is what I'm going to do. She shouldn't have done this. Or I know that it's not my right, and I know it's, for example, his properties had nothing to do with me, or I don't even own a stake in his properties, but I'm going to sue him and take half when I get divorced. Or even though I know Islamically the children are his, I'm going to take the children. For example, of these things. These things are placed beneath. And they tell you these things, are placed above, and your culture is inferior. They give us role models to tell us that this is how you're supposed to be. You look at the famous women around the world that have the most likes or whatever it is on social media, and all of them are favored for what? They're objectified. They're objectified for their sexual value, full stop. There's nothing else that's there. Nothing else. They don't look at the substance they have, not the content of their character, not their intellect, but it's just objectified as sexual value. That's it. Even when we want to find, for example, somebody to be a spokesperson for women's rights, or a spokesperson, we want to give her a Nobel Prize, she must be attractive. And that's what they find. This attractive girl escaped from ISIS, for example. And so she's going to be the spokesperson. This attractive girl was assaulted, and now she's going to be the face of women against assault. And basically they get her and then they sexualize her in that sense. But they do it in a very discreet way. Again, this is capitalistic culture. Capitalistic culture. Whereas in Islam, on the contrary, Islam is about a woman is valued on her intellect. A person is valued on what they say. Because ultimately, you have your thoughts, but your thoughts materialize in what you do and what you say. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, تَكَلَّمُوا تُعْرَفُوا إِنَّ الْمَرْءُ مَخْبُوءٌ تَحْتَ لِسَانِهِ. Speak and you shall be known. Verily, a human is hidden beneath his tongue. The way he speaks says what it is about his character. When we look at women, the importance of a woman wearing proper hijab. And this is one of the ways that they undermine Islamic culture. They destroy the Islamic culture. They say, you wear this sort of dress, you can't belong. You can't belong. There was a story of a youth who became school captain. He got voted in because he was popular. And then they said to him, we're going to meet with people. There was to achieve the award of becoming school captain, he had to shake hands with a female member of parliament. He said, as a Muslim, I can't do this. Perhaps not in that manner, I'm not sure. But when he said this, the principal said, I'm sorry, you can't be school captain. Because as a school captain, you need to shake hands with different people. But this is my culture. This is my religion. This for me is forbidden. I can't do this. Why can't you accept that this is a normal thing for me? But with others you accept it. Well, for example, when an Israeli dignitary visits, you put the little kappa on your head. When Julie Bishop knew that they were going to open up the doors, she was the foreign minister of trade with Iran, she ran to Iran with a hijab on. Quicker than a woman runs out when the garbage hasn't been taken out and the husband hasn't woken up. She put the hijab on quickly, jumped on a plane and ended up in Iran and said, please, let us be able to trade with you. Julie Bishop threw the hijab on and she ran. Look it up. Because they had to enter Iran and they have to respect that culture that they're entering. My point is, Islamic culture has its status, they take it away. They convince our women, for example, in schools, our daughters, our children, to wear pants, tight pants, instead of wearing skirts. So, you can't wear this. This is the uniform and this is what you have to wear. Or sometimes, for example, in the pursuit of sport, whether it's in Islamic football clubs that are owned or serviced by Islamic people like Banksia Tigers and like Antliff Aurora and whichever other team, and forgive me if I'm offending you, but when they have women's teams dressing in a certain manner, this is important. Dressing in a certain manner. And I don't know if they actually do. I'm just saying. This is just a general statement. Or within the schools, they tell them, all right, you need to play sports. So she says, okay, I'm going to wear skins, and I'm going to wear shorts and a shirt. But my arms, tight, and my legs, the skins are fully tight, and I'm running around. But where's my hijab gone? Where's my hijab gone? Where's my culture gone? It might look like something small, but what's actually happening is you're destroying that level of culture. You're destroying that level of culture. Slowly, you take that little bit away from the hijab. How many a person go to any Islamic school, the hijab's always like this and open, and the necks are showing. Muslims, normal. All right? Or they're doing different styles of hijab just to sort of belong and fit in. Why? What you have is something beautiful. Your culture is not inferior. And it should be allowed to be at the level of any other culture. And you shouldn't be judged on the way that you are dressed, but you should be judged on your intellect and your character. You shouldn't be objectified and sexualized. There was a study recently, because some people, this is very interesting. It goes back, and it's talking about, this is from a academic source. I think it was the University of Toronto. And this study by a group of scientists, they sat together, psychologists, and the title of their study was The Impact of Athletic Clothing, Style and Body Awareness on Motor Performance in Women, which basically means, how does it impact a woman if she wears tight clothing when she works out or if she wears loose clothing? Does it affect her performance? So what they did is they grabbed a bunch of women aged between 18 and 35, and this was released in June 2020, so it's a 2-year-old study, but there's many studies that are like it. And what they did is they got two groups. One of them was wearing tight, revealing clothing, which is classified as TR, and the other was wearing loose, concealing clothing, which was classified as LC. And so it said that these different styles suggest that the style of clothing may influence motor performance in women by reallocating cognitive resources towards the body and away from the motor task at hand. So they said that the women that were wearing tight clothing had no advantage over the women wearing loose clothing in the way that they performed in sport. Why? And one of the things they said that they focused on was they told the women that when they're working out, they need to watch their own body. And this is normal. When you're training or you're working out, you need to see that if you're doing the extensions or you're doing whatever it is in the right form. And so they had to look at it in that manner, so they were very aware of their body when they were doing it. They said the women wearing the tight clothing had no advantage, but what they did find was that women that wearing tight and revealing clothing perform worse on tasks that demand a greater allocation of cognitive resources in their brain, including tests of working memory, attention, and academic achievement. Because wearing tight and revealing clothing predicts greater body-related awareness and self-conscious emotions in women than wearing loose and concealing clothing. These deficits in cognitive performance have been attributed to a greater allocation of limited cognitive resources towards the body that in turn reduces resources available to process task-related information. What this basically means is that when a woman is aware of her body and she's wearing tight clothes, her mind is thinking about, how do I look that she can't perform properly? And even in a non-sports environment, academically, that amount of cognitive process that is focusing on her body and how it looks means she can't think properly. Can you believe that? So a woman that wears loose clothing can achieve better academically and achieve better in a physical sports environment. This is one study of many. And you can research it, you can look them up. My point is that we are sold something else. And have a look at what we are sold. Have a look at what all the sporting companies sell. Have a look at what they have to wear in the Olympics, for example. Why is it when we watch the football, for example, the World Cup football, they can wear loose clothing and play perfectly well, for example. The men are wearing loose clothing. But if it's AFL or if it's rugby league, then God forbid, right? Or swimming, for example. Anyway, I haven't looked into the studies of how much that aerodynamics will stop the drag when it comes to swimming. But the point of the matter is we can see, regardless, even if the performance is better, it's not worth the sale of your culture and your beliefs when it comes to this. And so, in conclusion, we come back to the importance of Islamic identity, to the importance and value of our religion, and the price that was paid of the ones before us to bring this religion to us. And of them, or most importantly of them, was Sayyidah Zainab, salamullahi alayha. Sayyidah Zainab, on this day, it's a day of celebration. But although it's a day of celebration, we need to remember these sacrifices of Sayyidah Zainab, salamullahi alayha. And we know of how many in the world sites there are for her mausoleum or place of her burial. There's one in Egypt, there's one in Syria, and there could be perhaps one or a few in other countries where they say that this is where Sayyidah Zainab is. The point is, whether she's buried in whichever country that she's buried in, this is somewhere where people go and they seek nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by being near to somebody who was close to Allah. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you think about this, in our lives, in 100 years' time, are you going to be remembered? We do live in an era, the digital super age. Perhaps in 150 years' time, all of our data will be studied in schools. You know, they'll just say, "I'll type in your grandfather's name and you can look at what he used to do on the internet," or whatever it is. Maybe all that data will be there, you know. Or we might be used as case studies. Wallahu a'lam. In 200 years' time, it'll be like we didn't exist. What will remain? How many people in this room can tell me the name of their great-grandfather, for example? Show of hands. MashaAllah. Very few. The name of the great, let alone what was his vocation, what did he do. That's what it is. From 1400 years ago, Zainab, the daughter of Imam Ali alayhi salam, not only has she a mausoleum everywhere, but all over the world, within these days, there are gatherings of people commemorating the birth of Sayyidah Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab, salamullahi alayha, why? Because she stood with Allah. Of the most important things, the Holy Prophet tells us, our whole religion is love of Ahlul Bayt. The beauty of it is in Karbala, this was shown. And Sayyidah Zainab was the one that showed it. She told them, she told Yazid, in the court of Yazid, or rather it was Imam al-Sajjad, when Sayyidah Zainab defended Imam Zain al-Abidin, he told him, he said, my father, because he says to him, you're the liar, son of a liar. He says, my father, my grandfather, Ali ibn Abi Talib, was holding the flag of Allah, the flag of Rasulullah in the battles, whereas your father and your uncles and your whole generation was holding the flag of kufr the whole time. Those supporters of the flag of kufr, full stop. That if, for example, we don't want to follow the Ahlul Bayt, then choose someone that wasn't the enemy of Islam, for example, at least. Like choose someone that was a good guy. Why the bad guy? Do you understand where this rift in Islam happens? The types like Muawiyah, like Yazid, and the people who placed Muawiyah with their hand in position, these are enemies of Islam. That if Ahlul Bayt isn't your choice, choose someone else. That's at least the friend of the Holy Prophet. And the Prophet told us, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this hadith, which is mutawatir, which is known in all of the books of ahadith, ahabba Allah man ahabba Husayna. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. For somebody, depending on their degree of love for Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi alayhi, this is his status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidah Zainab, her love of Imam al-Hussein was unmatched. Unmatched. She was with him every step of the way. Easily gave her sons to die as martyrs in protection of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahi alayhi. And the whole time she was in defense of the religion of Islam. By reminding them every time they would ask her something or they would bring her into a court, she would get up and she would speak in a manner that was so powerful that some of the people that heard the speech of Sayyidah Zainab said, we thought it was Imam Ali alayhi salam. The words were so eloquent and perfectly placed together that it was as if these are the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala valued Sayyidah Zainab so much so that on the day of Ashura, when she stood on a hillock, a small desert hill in Karbala, and she shouted out to Umar ibn Sa'd. And she said to him, will you just stand there and watch while this is happening without going into details? And this hillock is known as At-Talli al-Zainabi, right? At-Tall al-Zainabi. This is the hillock of Sayyidah Zainab. Why Sayyidah Zainab stepped on this ground and made it holy and said a few words. Sayyidah Zainab, salamullahi alayha, is somebody that's a true role model. Why? Look at where she is, how she got there, and the degree that she achieved. By having nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of the Ahlul Bayt, of the Ahlul Kisa, that she was external of. The way that she lived this sort of life and what she gave in defense for hijab and for the faith. In fact, the jihad of Sayyidah Zainab is comparable, if not perhaps on par, of the jihad, of the struggle, of the people who were with Imam al-Hussein. We have the hadith that says that the greatest jihad is a word of truth in front of a tyrannical tyrant, a tyrannical, sovereign, tyrannical ruler. If you say one word of truth, Sayyida Zainab salamullahi alayha said so many words of truth. When Ibn Ziyad asked her, what do you think of what's happened? Of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did with your brothers and your family and your sons. And she said to him, I didn't see except beauty. Right? Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. She said, I didn't see anything except beauty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These were people whom Allah wrote upon them martyrdom. And they went to their places and they fought and they died. This is the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And within these sayings and many more details within the life of Sayyida Zainab, which we could speak about in all honesty for weeks on end, regarding what's her stand and her stance in life. But the point is, Sayyida Zainab salawatullahi alayha is this symbol of Islamic identity. And this is the symbol that we need to understand and instill into ourselves and into our children to preserve the Islamic identity. It's very important. Something that we are losing slowly. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our holy Imam Al-Jaafaria al-Sharif. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on our dead, to cure our sick. We ask Allah to fulfill our deeds, to protect our youth, inshaAllah. And we ask Allah to help us against our lower selves in the same way that He helps the righteous of His servants against their lower selves. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى في هذه وفي كل وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات وأرواح أمواتكم جميعا. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة وأهدى ثوابها إليه مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.